happy to be here today. I can remember vividly a visit here nearly 5 years ago when the graduates of 2010 were incoming freshmen. And just watching you now, what confidence you have gained and what different people you seem to be now than you seemed to be 4 years ago. It's as if I met high school students when I arrived, and now I'm saying goodbye to more than 300 adults. As a few of you may remember from my earlier visit to Whittier, I am what is compassionately called an older father. The may well be dropped. Just plain old is more on the mark. I have two beautiful sons, Timmy, who is now almost 7, Tad, who is almost 5. Not long ago, I came across the younger boy, Tad, peeing into a wastebasket. Not just a wastebasket, but a wire mesh wastebasket. And not just a wire mesh wastebasket, but a wire mesh wastebasket situated on a bathroom floor that had been recently and very expensively recarpeted. The boy was then 4 years old. He knew better. I spoke to him earnestly, sharply, you might say. Or you might say I yelled bloody murder, which made matters worse. Tad froze. His angle of attack had become indecisive. His target was not quite the toilet and not quite the wastebasket. I was furious, as I had every right to be. In any case, once Tad had finished his business, I ordered the boy to drop to his knees and begin blotting up the mess with wads of toilet paper. This complicated the situation. Toilet paper is designed to disintegrate. And now, in addition to a moisture problem, the carpet was strewn with thousands of tiny white flakes of paper. The whole time I kept asking Tad over and over why he had done this strange thing. Why, I kept asking, or should I say yelling, but the kid couldn't speak. He was paralyzed, it seemed, by the shrill tone of my voice. Eventually, my wife took over the discipline chores, and I retreated to my office, where I sat muttering to myself. After an hour or so, little Tad came toddling into the office. The boy looked at me with a combination of remorse, fear, and ferocious concentration. His eyes brown and wide, his lower lip trembling, his tongue snagged up on the rough edges of language. I have 2 heads, he said. What? I said. I have 2 heads, he said. What? I said. You asked why I did it, said Tad. It's because I have 2 heads. One head told me, Daddy won't like this. The other head said, this is going to be fun. A number of thoughts came to me in a rush. My son would no doubt become a psychiatrist one day, or perhaps need one. My son understood the ambiguities and difficulties of moral choice far better than any Texas politician or any talking head on the Fox channel. My son was not the budding juvenile delinquent I'd envisioned only a few minutes earlier. That evening, I moved with newfound respect for my son to his bedroom for our usual nighttime story session. As a novelist, I consider it fitting to make up bedtime yarns for my kids, little 10-minute tales to escort them into sleep. That night, I began my story this way. Once upon a time, I actually knew somebody with 2 heads. Really, said Tad, what was his name? His name was Daddy, I said. Both Tad and his older brother, Timmy, fixed concerned gazes on my neck in search of scars or head stumps. You really had 2 heads, said Timmy. I did, I said. maybe more than 2. And then, over the next 15 minutes, I told my sons the story of what had occurred to me in the summer of 1968. The summer I was drafted, the summer I became a soldier. One of my heads, located, let us say, above my right shoulder, was fiercely patriotic, loved its country, respected authority, respected tradition, and believed in such values as duty and sacrifice and service to one's nation. The other head, teetering precariously on my left shoulder, also believed in these things, but at the same time found itself opposed to a war in Vietnam and wanted nothing to do with it. Certainly not the killing part, and even more certainly not the dying part. I was 21 years old. I was terrified. I sat where you are now sitting, scared out of my mind. And through the summer of 1968, after my own graduation, those two heads endlessly confronted each other, challenging, mocking, debating, taunting, cussing, invoking God, invoking the names of LBJ and Richard Nixon and Jane Fonda and Abby Hoffman and Patrick Henry and Donald Duck. At times, the two heads spoke quietly and rationally. Other times, the heads screamed outlandish obscenities at each other, much as people were screaming their black and white platitudes all across our republic during that hot summer of 1968. By this point, of course, both Tad and Timmy were asleep, dreaming their youthful dreams. But for a long, long while, I lay there in the dark, flanked by my precious boys, still telling the story, or should I say retelling it, as I have been doing now for 40 years. Not aloud, of course, telling it in my thoughts, in my writing, and in my memory. Even now, 4 decades later, those two heads are still yapping away. Now and then, the first head will score a sterile rhetorical victory. Other times, head number 2 wins the battle. Sometimes, one head might say to the other, "What a coward you were for going to that war." And the other head will shake itself ruefully and say, "You did what your country asked you to do." And the first head will chuckle and say, "Oh, right, and what if my country asked me to blow up Toronto tomorrow?" And the head on my right shoulder will sternly declare, "You live in a great and good nation, a country that would never issue such an order." And the other head will say, "What about My Lai? What about the American Indian? What about weapons of mass destruction that didn't exist? What about slavery? What about Jim Crow laws?" And the first head will say, "Everybody makes mistakes." And the other head will say, "Exactly my point." And on and on and on and on to my grave. It strikes me now on this wonderful day of your lives that you, the graduates of Whittier College, as the lucky recipients of a good education, will in the years to come find yourselves engaging in many such ceaseless internal debates. Should I marry Bill? Or should I marry Phil? Or should I dump them both and marry Jill? Should I keep plugging away at this hateful job? Or should I seek a better future in Fiji? Should I vote for a war? Or speak in support of a war? And yet not go to it myself? And not send my own sons and my own daughters to kill and to die? Part of being an adult is that at certain points in your lives, you will carry on your shoulders multiple heads. Sometimes 2, most of the time, many more. This can be a curse, It can lead to late-night second-guessing, wee-hour remorse, endless speculation about what could have been and what should have been. You may well find yourselves, in a decade still to come, lying in bed with your own children, revisiting through a story, a moral choice you made, or failed to make, or would make differently. Two heads can be a problem, but in the end, those two heads, which will surely be gabbing at each other inside you in the years ahead, are also among the greatest of our human blessings. Two heads can be the sign of a person attuned to the world's pesky, irksome ambiguities and complexities and mysteries and unknowns. The sign of a person sophisticated enough to understand that knowledge can be imperfect and that one's own judgment may be dead wrong, or may evolve, or may refine itself. To carry two heads through life, however burdensome, however dispiriting, may help to avoid the soul-killing, people-killing mistakes of absolutism. Muhammad Atta, the hijacker and final pilot of one of those airliners that struck the World Trade Center on September 11, 2001, had but one head, a bonehead at that, an absolutist of the most consummate and deadly sort. Atta thought he knew the final, and absolute, and definitive truth of things, a truth worth killing for and worth dying for. Let us not, let me not, and let you not commit the same one-headed sins of vanity and demagoguery and complacency and self-righteousness and self-congratulation and zealotry and fanaticism and simple-minded black and white, I'm right and you're wrong declarations about the truth of things. After the events of recent years, I have come to fear that our own nation, as much so as any nation, is endangered by such slick, self-centered, absolutist rhetoric that erases our own shortcomings and poo-poos our own ethical and moral failures. Torture, for example. As graduates of Whittier College and as the beneficiaries of an education in the liberal arts, we've been instructed, if nothing else, in the complications and the contradictions of our puzzling universe. And it's my hope that you will apply what you have learned as a precaution against one-headed absolutism of any sort. It is important to have the courage of your convictions, but what if one has the conviction that, say, women belong in the kitchen and nowhere else? Or the conviction that evolution has been on a downhill track since the appearance of the gerbil? Or the conviction that all babies in a village called My Lai must be put to death? Muhammad Atta had his convictions, as did Adolf Hitler, as did Osama bin Laden. So beware, too, as you leave this glorious institution, beware of such platitudes of courage and conviction. For conviction itself can be transformed, and has been transformed, into the most barbarous and murderous horror. Your two heads will be heavy, but carry them high, and don't forget to use them. Congratulations, class of 2010.